He had told them not to come, but they came anyway. It was the end of a long, sun-drenched summer. The kind of summer that leaves a golden haze on everything, even the cool, damp stones of an old cabin nestled deep in the woods. Arthur, a man who had known a quiet life for decades, found himself standing on his porch, watching as 3 vehicles, 2 SUVs and a small sedan, crunched to a halt on his gravel driveway. The jokes had started a month ago, as soon as he announced he was buying the place. "Enjoy your haunted cabin, Arthur," his friends had quipped over video calls. They said it with a laugh, but there was an undercurrent of something else in their voices, a kind of morbid curiosity. They had always been a little too fond of ghost stories and urban legends, a pastime Arthur had never shared. Now they were here. Sarah, with her boisterous laugh and a cooler full of craft beer. Mark, ever the practical one, with a toolbox and a look of mild skepticism. And David, the youngest and most excitable of the group, already fumbling with a camera to document their spooky adventure. "Arthur." Sarah's voice cut through the stillness of the woods. "You didn't really think we'd let you have all the fun, did you?" Arthur offered a tired smile. "I was hoping you would." He had tried to explain. The cabin wasn't haunted. Not in the way they meant. It was just old. It had a deep, quiet presence, a history that whispered in the rustling leaves and the creaking floorboards. It was a place for solitude, for reflection. But they weren't listening. They were already unloading their gear, their laughter echoing through the trees, a jarring intrusion on the serene silence. The first night was a blur of noise and activity. They explored the cabin, shining flashlights into dark corners and exclaiming over the ancient stone fireplace. They told ghost stories around a crackling fire, their voices hushed in mock terror, and drank until the stars blurred in the ink-black sky. Arthur sat on the porch, a mug of steaming chamomile tea in his hands, watching them from a distance. He felt a sense of unease, a feeling that this place was not meant for such a raucous gathering. The next morning, the jokes continued. "Did you hear that?" David whispered, his eyes wide. "The floorboards were groaning all night. It must be a ghost." Arthur simply shook his head. "That's just the house settling, David. It's over 200 years old." But the jokes began to feel less like jokes. The first oddity was minor. Mark couldn't find his watch. He swore he had left it on the kitchen counter, but it was gone. They searched for an hour, turning over cushions and peering under furniture, but it was nowhere to be found. "The ghost must have taken it," Sarah said, her voice a little too light. Then came the sounds. Not the creaks and groans of an old house, but distinct, rhythmic tapping. It came from the walls, from the attic, from places they couldn't see. The tapping would start late at night, a slow, insistent rhythm, and then stop abruptly, leaving a heavy, breathless silence in its wake. They tried to find the source, knocking on walls and listening intently, but the tapping would always move, as if it were playing a game. The atmosphere in the cabin shifted. The laughter grew strained, and the ghost stories they had told with such relish now hung in the air, heavy and unwanted. Mark, the pragmatist, was the first to show his unease. He became withdrawn, his brow furrowed in concentration, as if trying to solve a puzzle that defied all logic. Sarah, the life of the party, became jumpy, starting at every shadow and every sudden sound. Arthur watched them. He saw the shift from jocularity to genuine fear. He saw the bravado melt away, replaced by a quiet, gnawing dread. He tried to tell them it was all in their heads, a product of their own expectations, but his words held no weight. They had come looking for a ghost, and now they believed they had found one. The climax of their terror came on the third night. They were all in the living room, huddled together around the fireplace. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and the wind moaned outside, a mournful sound that seemed to seep into the cabin. Suddenly, a low, melodic hum filled the air. It was a beautiful sound, a soft, resonant chord, but it was coming from the walls themselves. David jumped to his feet, his face pale. "What is that?" Arthur didn't answer. He simply sat and listened, a quiet understanding dawning in his eyes. The hum grew louder, filling the room with a vibrating, ethereal music. Then, a single, clear voice joined in. It was a woman's voice, singing a simple, ancient lullaby. The words were in a language they didn't know, but the melody was heartbreakingly familiar, filled with a deep, sorrowful love. Sarah let out a small sob. "Arthur, what is happening?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The voice was all around them now, a gentle, pervasive presence. It wasn't menacing. It wasn't trying to scare them. It was simply there. It was a voice of a mother singing to her child, a voice of comfort and love and deep, abiding loss. It was the heart of the cabin, the history he had felt but they had not understood. Mark, the pragmatic one, was the first to break. He stood up, his shoulders slumped, and a tear rolled down his cheek. We shouldn't have come, he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. We didn't respect this place. David was openly weeping, his bravado gone, his camera forgotten on the floor. Please, Arthur, he choked out. Make it stop. We'll leave. Just make it stop. Arthur looked at his friends, their faces etched with a fear he had never seen before. He finally understood. They had joked about a ghost, about a haunting, because it was a thrilling, controllable kind of fear. But this was different. This was not a ghost. This was a presence, a history, a heart that had been awakened by their disrespect. It was the spirit of the place, a deep, sorrowful love that their crass intrusion had disturbed. It wasn't malice, it was grief. He stood up and walked to the center of the room. He didn't speak to them, but to the air around him. We are sorry, he said, his voice soft but firm. We are sorry for disturbing you. We came with no ill will, but we were foolish. Please, forgive us. We will leave you in peace. The singing faded, the hum receding back into the walls, until the only sound was the crackle of the fire and the ragged breathing of his friends. The next morning, they packed in silence. The jokes were gone, replaced by a profound and humbling reverence. Mark found his watch, sitting right where he had left it, on the kitchen counter. He didn't say a word, just put it on his wrist and gave Arthur a long, meaningful look. As they were about to get in their cars, Sarah turned to Arthur, her eyes wet. Arthur, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Can we come back? Not to joke, not to look for ghosts, but to sit with you. To understand this place. Arthur looked at the old cabin, its stone walls glowing in the morning light. He looked at the quiet woods, the rustling leaves, and the clear blue sky. He looked at his friends, their faces no longer filled with a jocular bravado, but with a newfound respect. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile. You are welcome here, he said, anytime. When you are ready to listen. They nodded, their understanding now complete. They got in their cars and drove away, and the crunching of the gravel on the driveway this time sounded like a gentle farewell. Arthur stood on his porch, the sun warm on his face, the quiet hum of the old cabin filling his heart. It was not a haunted cabin. It was a cabin with a heart, a memory, and a spirit of its own. He finally felt at home, not because he owned the place, but because he was a part of its silence. He had asked them to leave, but he now realized he had simply been asking them to listen. And now, they had. And so had he.